Dr. Brown, thank you for joining us. With over 40 years of experience in neurotherapy and as a founder of TrueBearing Academy, you have witnessed the evolution of neurofeedback from clinical only applications today's remote capabilities. I'm sorry for my English. I'm more German, Swiss, and Spanish, but I will try to figure it out. So, can you briefly explain what makes TrueBearing's approach to remote neurofeedback unique?
Of course, Marcel, and thank you for having me. My your English is much better than my German, so this is good. We'll probably do it this way. All right. Yeah, you are. It makes me feel a little old when you say it, but it's true. I've been involved in neurofeedback for over 40 years. I was very fortunate to be in grad school back in the late 70s and early 80s when in Southern California, it was basically being discovered and elaborated. And so I got to, kind of be a fly on the wall during some of the early days with neurofeedback. So it's a pleasure to be with you today and share with you what I would think of as the best kept secret in mental health and performance.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we're going through some questions for today in our first podcast. So thank you again for joining us. Recent research from McGill University shows that remote neurofeedback delivered consistently can achieve similar outcomes to clinic-based sessions, particularly for ADHD and anxiety. Based on your clinical experience, Dr. Brown, what are the key advantages you have observed with remote neurofeedback delivery?
You bet. I'm going to use an overused word here in the States, but I'm going to use it anyway. And that is that neurofeedback, in my opinion, the addition of remote capability has been a massive game changer in the field. Really, the biggest reason it is producing the kind of effects that McGill has found is the dose effect. If you were doing neurofeedback traditionally, you'd have to come into office, you'd have to get in your car, you'd have to go in, and you're lucky if you can make it in twice a week. Well, imagine just going to the gym twice a week. You're probably not going to get those six-pack abs, that you're
No.
looking for with just going twice a week. With remote, you can potentially do neurofeedback every single day, possibly even more than once in a day. And what we know about neurofeedback is it's a cumulative process, kind of like the gym. The more you go, the better you're going to do. So that's really, in many ways, the primary benefit to remote, in addition, of course, to convenience for the client and the capability to train whenever they want. The equipment now is much simpler to work with than back in the day. It's much
Mm.
more robust. It's easier to work with for clients. Not intimidating, even if you're somebody who is maybe a little sensitive to technology. It's a pretty easy system to learn.
Great. And how does the true bearing method ensure treatment fidelity when patients are training from home? And what role does real-time supervision play in maintaining therapeutic outcomes?
Sure. Well, let me back up a moment and just say that neurofeedback at its heart is very simple. It's brain training. So if you're a golfer, you do a lot of physical training. If you're a basketball player or a football player, you do a lot of physical training. If you're in business, you get training. Maybe you have a master's in business administration or something like that. Neurofeedback is training for the brain, not
Mm.
the body, although it does, and the brain and the body are really. The brain is part of the body. That's how tight the connection is. But when I say training, you might think of it this way. Imagine your body is a guitar. You can have the world's best guitar. If it's not in tune, it's not going to play well. I don't care how good of a guitarist you are, it's going to sound odd. And so the tuning of that guitar limits how much you can get out of it. Uh, the very simple explanation is this is the way we have of tuning the brain so that it is Often our brains can get dysregulated through stress or trauma or any of a number of things, moves the brain back to the state that it evolved to be in. We call that a ready state. And there are a variety of ways we do that inside of neurofeedback. But at its simplest, we are basically picking up information from the brain. We're not sending anything. We're not shocking or doing anything like that. We're picking information up from the brain, processing it, and sending it back in the form of a game or changes on the screen that are giving information not to your mind so much as to your brain.
Mm.
Your brain is wanting to be in balance. And when it begins to get these little clues, sort of like breadcrumbs for how to get back to balance, it is going to follow those breadcrumbs. It's evolved to do that. So that's in a nutshell what neurofeedback is in terms of its ability. It can affect a wide range of capabilities that humans have because the brain's kind of involved in all of them. It can affect improved sleep. It can affect emotional states. It can affect your cognitive decision-making ability, creativity, meditative states, sports performance, physical performance of all kinds. All of those things are potentially areas that neurofeedback can be helpful.
Great, great. That sounds incredible. And well, your biopsychosocial approach recognizes that body, brain, mind, and spirit are interconnected. So, from a neuroplasticity perspective, how does consistent neurofeedback training create lasting changes in the brain function? And why is it particularly important for conditions like depression, where we see alpha wave imbalances in the left frontal lobe, for example?
You bet. You bet. Yeah, so several things. You brought up several things here. Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is something we know occurs. When I was in grad school, way back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, we were taught that the brain never changes. In fact, you never grow new neurons. We know that's wrong now. We know that's massively wrong. The brain is always evolving, always changing. There are literal physical changes that occur in the brain over time in response to conditions because the brain has evolved to respond and adapt. Neurofeedback just basically capitalizes on that. The purpose of the training is to teach the brain in the most efficient way possible, first of all, what that desired state, how to get there, right? Kind of
Mm.
the brain, often when we're dysregulated, the brain sort of lost its ability to get there. Kind of like, I don't know if you have these, I think you do in Germany, these robotic vacuums. We call them
Yeah,
Roombas in
yeah,
the States. How they can do a really good job going around and sweeping up, but sometimes they get caught under the dining room table and they're just kind of banging back and forth. It's sort of
yeah.
like the brain can get kind of stuck and it's just continuing in this dysregulated state. Neurofeedback is a way of giving the brain guidance for how to get out from under the dining room table and get back to what it's supposed to do. And the brain's evolved to do that. It doesn't have to be told to do it. It's going to want to do it. When you teach the brain to get back to that desired state and to hold that desired state longer, not a fraction of a second, which is what usually happens with people who are dysregulated, but for several seconds at a time. And then the brain maybe falls off a little bit and comes back. When you increase that ability of the brain to hold that state, what happens over time is you start generating new neurons. You start generating more dendritic connections, more
Hmm.
interlinking. The term we use is neurons that fire together, wire together. You teach these neurons to keep producing this desired state. If we had you hooked up to an fMRI, which is kind of taking a movie of your brain, when you do neurofeedback, you would see an entire circuit lit up. By lit up, I mean that's
Hmm.
our indicator that oxygen is being delivered, not just to the single site or a few sites we're training, but to the entire circuit that it participates in. Any physiologist will tell you when you see oxygen being delivered to a part of the brain, it means there is neurogenesis occurring. You're literally changing your brain over time. which is why neurofeedback tends to be something that is persistent in its effect, because you've literally changed the brain. It's not just changing a habit, it's literally changing the brain and the way it works. This, by the way, you mentioned the TrueBearing method. This is a method that I've kind of put it together, but really it is just the accumulated knowledge in our field over 40 years of protocols that we know work based on brain states that we know are associated with certain conditions. And this is a method that we believe is really the most efficient, quickest way for the brain to get to that neuroplastic change. You mentioned the front left. This is one of the most replicated findings in neurophysiology, and that is that if you have excess slow wave, alpha is a slow wave, sometimes this
Mm.
can be theta, another slow wave. When you have excess slow wave in the front left part of the brain, it's associated with depression. Fairly strongly, and there are reasons for that we could talk about, but it's an empirical fact that we're aware of. Well, knowing that, we know how to actually reduce alpha on the left and to get that brain back into a more regulated state. And so, in my mind, this kind of works with psychotherapy. It's not necessarily a replacement for psychotherapy, although sometimes I work with people and I'm just their brain mechanic. Other times I'm doing this in combination. Because you'll find people who are kind of stuck in
Mm.
psychotherapy, and it's because their brain is kind of missing the circuits. The particular circuits that maybe the brain has started with have kind of gone stale, so to speak. We've moved into dysregulation. So in my mind, back to the guitar, you tune the guitar, and then you're better able to figure out what's the song I'm going to play. To stick with that analogy,
Mhm.
that's the role of psychotherapy or self-help, is to figure out what you're going to play with yourself, with your body
Yeah.
and your brain. And neurofeedback is simply a way of getting that guitar tuned optimally for the goal that you have.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds very logical. And for example, the concept of true bearing suggests navigating toward optimal brain states. Can you elaborate on how your protocol suite addresses the spectrum from anxiety and trauma to executive processing and interpersonal adaptation?
Of
Sorry.
course. Oh, yeah, of course. That's a great question. So, as with really any other scientific endeavor, we always start with assessment. There's
Mm-hmm.
a great deal that we know about functionality of the brain. But everyone is a bit unique. We all have different pathways to depression
Yeah.
or anxiety or a performance issue or whatever the issue may be. And so we always want to do an assessment. We have an assessment called the TheraQ. This is an assessment that I built for a platform called Divergence. Divergence Neuro is the platform that we work with, and I know that you work with as well. And that TheraQ gives us basically a snapshot of the entire brain and its function. And from that, we can pick up, do we have the markers for trauma? Do we have the markers for sleep dysregulation, for an emotional dysregulation like anxiety or anger or impulse control? On the other side of the spectrum, performance enhancement. We can look at parts of the brain and their EEG pattern and how that those patterns are associated with various kinds of performance issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, for instance, that divergent thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, that sort of thing, is kind of a process that involves the entire brain, but the jazz ensemble is led by the front right. Right, the front right part of the brain tends to
Mm-hmm.
be takes the lead in divergent thinking. So if you have someone who wants, this is a simple kind of explanation, but if you have someone who wants to become more creative, we may take a look at the right side of the brain. And especially in the front, and look at what might be happening there that may not be optimal. You may have a golfer, let's say, who's got the yips. Do you use that term? Just kind of get a little freaked out when it's time to make
Yeah.
that putt. And I'm working with a professional golfer exactly like that right now. He's got the yips when it comes to that. that becomes kind of a combination of some mental strategies, cognitive behavioral strategies to help kind of calm some of that cognition. But again, if your wiring is working against you, we want to fix the wiring. We want to tune the guitar. And so this might be a situation where we do a combination of coaching around how you manage your thinking, but also neurofeedback can help calm that kind of level of anxiety on the one
Hmm.
hand. On the other hand, kind of that difficulty with pulling the trigger. That's kind of what it ends
Yeah.
up being for that golfer. Just don't know quite when to pull the trigger. In neurofeedback, it's possible to do training that is, you might say, off the green, where you're kind of tuning the guitar, but also on the green. It is possible to get live neurofeedback while you're golfing and begin to learn. Your brain is learning, and even mentally, you begin to recognize the state that would say, now's the time to make the putt.
Hmm. Great. Well, yeah, and as you know, we are working together since a couple of months, and at Las Almas Group we are implementing our hybrid fast therapy program, which combines the multiple modalities, including neurofeedback, RTMS, which is magnetic stimulation, and also ketamine-assisted therapy in an intensive 2-week format. How do you see neurofeedback complementing our neuroplasticity enhancing treatments like ketamine therapy, or particularly in terms of brain state optimization?
You bet. Well, I'll say, first of all, one of the reasons I was interested in working with you all is you are moving into such a cutting edge area, and areas that are really backed by research, these multiple areas of affecting the brain, affecting the body in positive,
Mm,
positive kind of ways. And, I just find that very exciting. The two things I would say that neurofeedback adds to the mix, one of them is assessment, because none of those other methods really have a way of assessing what's happening in the brain. You're kind of guessing a little bit. You're inferring, from symptoms and that
yeah,
kind of thing, what might be happening in the brain. With neurofeedback, you can know. You can know really what's happening in the brain.
yeah,
B, are our interventions working? C, is there persistent change that's on the other side of that? So neurofeedback is very helpful on the assessment and evaluation side of things. I would say uniquely so. Secondly, there's a difference in that a lot of the methods you described, TMS and so forth, they're very powerful methods. I've kind of put them in the category of treatment. It is something, like with TMS, you're sitting in a
mm,
chair and the machine
yeah,
is, doing some operations on you. You could be reading a book during that time and you can experience some really powerful change. However, neurofeedback is different in that we don't refer to it as treatment, we refer to it as training, right? Kind of, again,
mm,
back to my gym metaphor. Uh, I'm pretty sure this is true in Europe as well. It turns out you don't get six pack abs just by buying a gym membership. You actually have to show up
you have to go.
and you
Yeah,
actually have to
for
learn to
sure.
lift and all of that.
I
Right,
can
right,
tell a
exactly.
story. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
that's true.
So, of all of these methodologies, neurofeedback tends to be the most clear in its neuroplastic effect. There is something about, and we could drill down and I could tell you about what we know about what the brain does when you engage, when you're not sitting back reading a book, but you are engaged in the feedback, you're using some skills and techniques to allow the brain to optimize. That process seems to create a pretty distinctive climate, so to speak, or an environment in the brain to optimize neuroplastic effect. So, what we have found is that in addition to the assessment and evaluation component, to add neurofeedback to the broader range of the kind of things you're doing, can add a really powerful component because you're adding that engagement during the treatment, the training process, during the time that they might be at Las Almas, and then potentially afterwards. To be doing neurofeedback after, it's kind of akin to you go to Las Almas to set the broken leg, right? And then when you leave, you have a cast. You have this
Yeah.
process, this neurofeedback process, to ensure that those changes are made permanent, made persistent.
Yeah, this is also as you said when you finish our hybrid fast therapy because for us it's also very important the time after because we stabilize the people, we help them to go
Yes.
to have a better life, and then the follow up with our post e-health therapy program, which focuses on
Yes.
maintaining therapeutic gains through technology supported interventions because we all our, let's say, technology we have in the clinic, we have it also in the
Mhm.
small part, like neurofeedback. And given
Mhm.
that neurofeedback effects can persist post-treatment, how can remote neurofeedback serve as a maintenance tool to prevent relapse and sustain neuroplastic changes achieved through
Right.
this intensive
Right.
therapy?
Right. Here's a really simple way of thinking about it. Whether you're looking at RTMS or ketamine or psychedelics, any of those kinds of things, what they do in different ways is they perform a reset. They kind of
Mm,
reset the brain, which is very frequently going to lead to some pretty significant changes in how someone feels. However, to go back to that biopsychosocial word, and I promised I'd only use one fancy term today, so that'll be it. Uh, the biopsychosocial idea basically means that if you have a significant problem in living, chances are it's all three of those things are involved. To go from the end back to the beginning, there's a social component, the relationships that you're in, the psychological component, habits of thinking, the biological component, EEG patterns, brain patterns, and all three of those are likely to be important. So if you have that reset at Las Almas, and then you go home and you go back to the same soup you were in before, the
yeah.
same web of relationships, the same environmental conditions, there are going to be sort of environmental pressures to kind of move back into old patterns, right? And so neurofeedback is again my analogy of the cast. It's a way of kind of maintaining that reset so that it has a chance to stabilize over time, even potentially extend the resets. There are many of my patients who come in and maybe they're complaining of depression, and we get them past that depression. Maybe it was a treatment resistant depression. We get them past that, and now they want to go into performance. They want to
Oh.
go from like making a negative kind of neutral. Now they want to go to the positive, and they want to become a better musician, or they want to become a better athlete, or they want to just simply be more mindful around their family. It allows you to kind of take that next step potentially as well.
Hmm, that's true. And well, how you think about AI? For example, current researchers shows that AI-driven personalization and closed-loop systems are revolutionizing. Jesus, what a word! The big revolution in neurofeedback delivery. How do you envision these technologies enhancing the true bearing method, particularly regarding individual protocol selection based on the EEG patterns?
Okay, I'm going to come right to the edge of revealing some secrets here in terms of where
Yeah.
we are. I would say, first of all, and this could be a podcast in and of itself, there are things to be careful with about AI, of course. And what we have found, what I think most people who are involved in AI have found, is if you give AI a clearly defined set of information on which to act, you have a much safer, much more powerful kind of methodology. We are actually in process on several fronts of creating kind of an AI enhanced, driven by human beings, driven by the information we have in the TrueBearing method.
Mm,
We have quite a well developed set of information for AI to utilize to really look at how to optimize the tuning of these protocols. In the TrueBearing method, we have 13 core protocols, and then those protocols can become very sophisticated by adding sites and various other forms of training. Probably about 80 protocols altogether. And each of those can be tuned. They're kind of like recipes, right? You might have a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, right? That's your standard recipe. But if you're making them for an uncle who likes walnuts, you're going to put walnuts in it. right? You
Yeah.
customize it for that person. Our protocols are like that, and the clinicians develop those kind of tunings. And I do expect we are going to, from the work we're doing with kind of an AI assisted approach to the method, we're going to be able to get more and more fine tuning to these protocols. So I'm very excited about that. I do think remote has been a revolution in neurofeedback. It's literally what pulled me out of retirement to form TrueBearing Academy, because it just seemed like the time was here. The next revolution, I think, is going to be AI and kind of augmenting what we know
Mm.
in how we serve our clients.
Oh, great. And yeah, and studies indicate that for variable EEG devices and cloud-based platforms are making neurofeedback more accessible, so also cheaper for the people.
Yes.
And what challenges and opportunities do you foresee in maintaining clinical grade effectiveness as neurofeedbacks become more consumer accessible?
That's a really good question. I would say, well, a couple of things I would say. One is that neurofeedback allows you to deliver some kind of help to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to make use of traditional forms.
Mm,
I work with many dozens of people who are, for instance, in remote contexts. I work with many people in Europe and Asia and all around the world doing neurofeedback for whom they do not have a local neurotherapist. They might not even have a psychotherapist available. They're trying to
mm,
find something, right? So having these cloud-based, remote capable platforms allows for people at a very cost-effective level to receive training, excuse me, that will benefit them substantially. And I just think this is the coming revolution in mental health care. Anybody who's seen
for
any of
sure.
my stuff online will know my basic statement is that the way we deliver mental health services pretty much throughout the world is broken. Full stop. It's especially broken in the US, but it is kind of broken in lots of places around the world. We have great modalities and great treatments, but getting them to people in an affordable way is just really challenging. And so whether you're in
Mm,
kind of the U.S. system of insurance, or whether you're in Europe and you've got more kind of public health care, each has its own challenges in terms of how you actually get help. And so I have found that offering neurofeedback as a way of helping people that can go straight to their need is very powerful. And I think that's kind of where you're headed with Las
mm,
Almas. Very excited about that because it opens up the possibility of access in ways that people might not ordinarily have had. Lots of people don't want to, leave their home, or they don't want to, for whatever reason, be involved in psychotherapy. Or if it's on the performance side,
mm.
they don't really want to hire a coach or, whatever, in the traditional kind of way. This offers a new way of approaching things that I think a lot of people find attractive.
Yeah, I think also that this is a growing market, and people they have to know it. And well, looking, let's say, for the next 10 years, 2035, the market projection, for example, suggests that neurofeedback will reach about 2.97 billion globally. With
Yes.
I think 48 percent of adoption variable devices, and the 33 percent shift to remote delivery, which is quite huge. So how is your vision for remote neurofeedback evolving? And what role will the hybrid therapy models play in the future of mental
Mhm.
health care? How will it work out for in the next 10 years, in your opinion?
Well, you are describing really why I did not go into retirement and kind of did this because I knew we had this method, for doing neurotherapy, and for a variety of different reasons, that was not well disseminated across and even the knowledge of neurofeedback in general was not very well known in many mental health settings. I believe that is fundamentally changing. I'm working with clinics and individuals around the world, and I see this hockey stick of interest and engagement that I did not see before. So, from my standpoint, what I believe is the limiting factor right now is not the device, it's not the
Mm-hmm.
platform. Right. There are even clinics like yours, that have come together, to start to produce these services. The limiting factor is really the quality of the training and the quality of how the neurofeedback is deployed. Neurofeedback is not a matter of just randomly putting electrodes on someone and walking away. If you get a neurotherapist that thinks that's the case, get another neurotherapist because that's not how that works. And it is really quite important. There are things to know and understand. And also, there has been kind of an idea, and I think we have this idea in the West that the more complicated something is, the better. That
Mm-hmm.
is not always true. Our brains are the complex thing. They
Yeah.
are the most complex organisms in the universe. At least that we know of. There's an incredible amount of complexity here, and understanding that we can actually use relatively simple tools and devices to accomplish a great deal of help for individuals. There are very complex forms of neurotherapy and neurofeedback, and I'm a fan of those as well. But for many people, they do not need a $20,000 unit that is going to basically, make them choose between
Yeah.
that or tuition for college for their kids. It can be delivered at a much more at a scale that's more in line with what the particular issue is that they have. So that, in my mind, is really the purpose of the TrueBearing Academy and the TrueBearing method, is to have a framework for training. Not just, I mean that in two senses: training of clinicians and also the training that the clinicians would deliver to clients. Having a clear method that will scale. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're scaling up. For instance, you have a clinic, you're going to have multiple clinics, you have multiple staff. Being able to have a design and approach to the way we deliver services that's consistent, that's what allows you, among other things, to evaluate progress. So whether you're having progress. If everybody does things differently, you aren't necessarily going to know what's having an appropriate effect. So that's really what we're here for in the Academy, is to be able to recommend appropriate devices and levels of training, and to train and support clinics and clinicians like yours.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate really your time. And yeah, I think, or well, I hope and think, and I'm totally confident that our collaboration will have, how they say in German, they will have fruits. I don't know if it's in the States, it's the same.
That works. Yeah.
And also the best wishes to your whole team, which are supporting us every week. And yeah, if you want to say the last words of our first podcast, you're welcome.
Thank you, Marcel, for having me. And I will just say, I am very interested in what you're doing with Las Almas. I'm so glad that we're partnering on that project, and I can't wait to see what the next few years brings for you and your team.
Great, great. Okay, thank you very much. And well, will have a good day. We are here in
Yes.
the near the evening. Okay, thank you very much.